Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today we're decoding the hidden mechanics of the spiritual realm, drawing straight from Chapter 1 of our source text, The Secret World of Religion, which was originally dated February 2nd, 2020. Get ready because we're about to pull back the curtain on the reality we see every single day.
We've all seen ghosts in Hollywood horror movies, right? But what if pop culture's entire depiction of spirits is just completely wrong? Okay, let's dive into this and uncover what the source material actually reveals about the true nature of the spirit world.
Section 1. The Spirit World Science Cannot Explain. Our source makes a super interesting point right out of the gate. Modern materialistic science is fundamentally unequipped to grasp spiritual truths. In fact, the text argues that if your head is filled only with materialistic values, it basically acts as a mountain of junk. Even if you experience something genuinely spiritual, your very first instinct is going to be to completely deny it just to protect your familiar, everyday worldview. Moving on to Section 2, Movie Ghosts versus Real Spirits.
Think about how absolutely wild Western movie ghosts are when you break it down. I mean, they walk upside down on ceilings, they leave muddy footprints, and they drag their physical feet around like zombies. The source points out that real spirits don't have physical bodies at all. They aren't bound by gravity, instead they float seamlessly through the air as hitodama, these glowing orbs or balls of light.
The text shares this chilling but honestly fascinating anecdote. About a week before an older man passed away, his neighbors actually saw these glowing orbs floating in and out of his roof. The source explains that this was the man's soul essentially practicing leaving his physical body. The spirit itself didn't even realize it was dying. It just felt this freeing sensation of flying.
And get this wild sensory detail from the text. If you were to actually touch one of these glowing fireballs, it doesn't burn. People who have experienced it report that it actually feels kind of like touching cotton candy, or sometimes like the rough bark of a tree. The spiritual world operates on rules that totally defy our physical expectations. Let's look at Section 3, Tengu, Sennin, and Yogai. Now, what's really interesting about these entities is that the source doesn't just treat them as folklore monsters. Not at all. They're actual spiritual beings trapped by very human, ego-driven flaws. You've got Tengu, who desperately crave power and fame, Sennin, who are completely obsessed with technology and technique, and Yukai, who basically delight in trickery and deception. They are all just manifestations of selfish desires.
Take the Tengu, for example. Their energy is fueled by this massive obsession. The source notes that if a Tengu spirit attaches to, say, a CEO or a politician, it can trigger an explosive, incredibly rapid rise to success. But because that success is rooted in pure ego rather than any genuine love for others, it inevitably ends in a sudden, devastating crash.
Then, on the flip side, you have the Sennin. They're described as eccentric inventors who isolate themselves, just obsessively trying to replicate spiritual tech in our physical world. And the yokai, like those infamous fox spirits, they thrive on duality. They shapeshift to hide their true motives and deceive humans. All of these just represent spiritual power being used in entirely the wrong direction.
Which brings us to Section 4, the danger of spiritual awakening.
So the crucial point is really understanding this dangerous downward spiral of spiritual awakening. When someone's spiritual senses begin to sharpen, they quite often develop a sort of conceit, this growing desire to feel special. And that expanding ego, it acts exactly like an open window to the mind, eventually allowing evil spirits to enter and take control.
The text impartially warns that these spiritual abilities act like a giant, powerful magnet. If you sharpen your senses, but you're still harboring even a little bit of anger, pride, or a thirst for fame, well, malevolent forces are going to smell it. They'll swarm right in, actively seeking a new host to latch onto.
There's a quote here that literally hits the nail on the head. Opening up spiritually with a proud heart is like leaving the windows of your house wide open for thieves. And, once that window is open and negative entities slip inside, trying to force them out on your own is incredibly difficult.
And that leads us perfectly into Section 5, humility to protect oneself. Okay, so how do we actually protect ourselves? The source points to deep humility, absolute sincerity, grounded effort, and having a solid foundation in orthodox faith. And this brilliantly illustrates that you don't need special magic or elaborate rituals at all. Simple, honest, human goodness is literally the ultimate shield against negative spirits. But it means we have to actively police our own minds. The text warns us to purge these animal tendencies from our daily lives. Don't manipulate and deceive people like a fox, and definitely don't hold on to burning, tense anger like a snake, because doing so is basically an open invitation for the very yokai and demons we just talked about.
Which leaves us with one final, pretty memorable question to ponder. If the window to your soul opened today, what kind of spirits would your current ego invite in? Understanding the unseen world is really, at its core, about facing your own mind. Keep that question with you today. Thanks so much for joining this explainer, and we'll see you next time.